Hey.
Hey.
I think we're live, Andre.
Are we already?
Is this thing in my face?
Is it 11 o'clock Monday Eastern Daylight Time?
Yes, it is.
Then we must be live.
Wow. How come your voice is gone, Andre?
I think it's gone because I lost it on the beach. We were partying the whole weekend. It was my birthday.
It's your birthday! What was yesterday? Happy birthday!
Hey, happy birthday to me and everybody else celebrating in June. Happy Pride Month, all that good stuff. It's a great time to be alive.
It is a great time to be alive. I think things are going to start opening up soon here in Toronto, but definitely the beach.
Around the world.
Definitely the beach was open yesterday
and
sure Saturday. Wow, was it busy. We have a great beach on the island
right downtown.
Here.
Right downtown, Nude Beach. But you have to take a ferry to get there or find a way to the island. And for the ferry that we use, there was apparently, but after like when we got there, when people were doing it in the afternoon, a 2 to 2.5 hour wait to get on the island.
Crazy.
Wow.
So unfortunately, some of our friends weren't able to join us, but we went early. But we're going to be there all summer. So
we're going to live there. Hey, we should like camp out there. Like Mal, our friend Mal lives there all the time. Right? He just squats on the island and has a good old time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, enough about the weekend. Oh, see, now my throat's hurting. So
by proxy.
So it's Mondays with Tara and Andre.
Hello.
And we come here live every week to talk about different subjects related to polyamory and open relating, sex, relationships. Today,
life in general.
We are doing trust part 2.
Trust part 2.
So last week we spoke a bit about trust and how to build trust in a relationship. And this week we're going to talk a bit about rebuilding it if it is lost.
Wow, not an easy task, but not impossible. I think a lot of it depends on your intention, right? If you're wanting to really make the effort and dedicate the time and actions necessary for it, it can be done. But I think that kind of, you got to figure out where you're really coming from. Are you wanting to be in a relationship? And we can help you figure that out. We can get some clarity on it and figure it out for yourself. And then if you are wanting to make an investment, let's go to it. Let's figure out how we might come to have a better understanding of what was at play. What created this breach of the trust? How does this arrangement get set up that it was or was not viable? And what do we do moving forward?
Right. So first of all, what is trust?
That's an excellent question. Trust is an agreement in the act of placing confidence in another.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good.
What would you say about it?
I'd say that's a good description.
Okay.
Given that's the definition we had written down. The act of placing confidence in someone or something else. So
I got it right. I must have been listening and wanting to understand.
So some people say, like there's all kinds of myths around polyamory. One of them being that you can't cheat in polyamory, but that's not true. No. So we talked quickly about some ways in which trust can be broken in polyamory.
Right. And that's also the myth very often in being in a monogamous relationship, right? Is that you think that you're going to take this vow, swearing off to all others. And I think in many cases, you're setting yourself up for potential failure. Your expectations are wonderful and fantastic, but maybe in some ways too fantastic. It's hard to think that one person is going to be the end all of everything for you in that time.
That's true.
Right? And I think in polyamory, we can enter into agreements also that may not be actually well suited, right? Or maybe what we agreed to yesterday may not be what we're wanting for today or tomorrow. So we need to be able to communicate about that as well.
That's for sure. And there's also broken promises, misrepresentation. Right. Apparently I can't talk either after
I wonder, is that
a weekend in the sun.
But is that a Freudian thing? You have issue saying misrepresentation? Are you in any way misrepresenting yourself?
Always the therapist.
Well, it's a possibility. I'm wondering.
It is a possibility. It's a possibility. So
you didn't answer the question.
It's not.
Do you think you misrepresent yourself at all? What do you mean by misrepresentation?
Well, someone can say that, I don't know, misrepresent themselves. That's a good question. Thanks for putting me on the spot on a Monday.
I think we do that really well with each other. We put each other on the spot. What's the definition of trust? Let me see if I'm paying attention.
Yes.
Well, what do you think it means to be misrepresenting of yourself?
Well, you say something about yourself that isn't true.
I was thinking about it. Well, that's true, absolutely. But I was thinking about it from a slightly different take, perhaps. I might misrepresent myself, or people might have misrepresented themselves with me in their intention. So I might say, "Oh, I really like you," and you might say, "Yeah, I really like you too." But maybe my idea of it is not quite the same as yours. And do I create this opportunity, this feeling that you feel you might have a hard time really announcing your true position? So are you, in a sense, misrepresenting your level of investment, enjoyment, whatever it might be. Because some people, like myself, perhaps at times, might find themselves wanting to kind of do a little bit of people pleasing or codependence or things of that nature.
Sure.
So we might not be as forthcoming in announcing our true position in that.
Yeah, so that's definitely a way you can misrepresent yourself.
Right. So be aware of how you feel truly about what's going on and how you might be able to be more accurate in your representation.
All right. So let's get to the meaty stuff. So when somebody breaks a confidence or whatever it is, we can feel very hurt and shocked and sometimes even physically sick. I've definitely felt that way when someone has, done something to lose my trust. It can be actually physically, physically hurtful.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a big deal. It is a big deal.
So if you want to rebuild trust, then there's we have like a list of 5 things that you could do, and so I'm going to put them up on screen because we're fancy today.
Wow, look at that. Fancy. We can read along together.
Yeah.
So how do we rebuild trust? 5 of the components.
Yes.
We might consider the reason behind the betrayal, which is what we were talking about before. Is the agreement? Are the parameters really something that we're comfortable living within, or are we somehow making the agreement to please the other person, or we think whatever it might be, or have they changed over time? Right.
So, but we also need to we'll get to that. We're going to go to that in details.
Right.
So this is just the list.
Yeah. Okay.
So communicate.
Always a great idea. Let's say everything, right? Yeah. Be open as possible and talk about things. Never being callous or inconsiderate, but really trying to give the other person as much data as possible, letting them know where we're coming from, and we can get where they're coming from and find out where there's overlap and how we might be able to make this viable.
Great. So releasing the anger.
Release the anger. That's a biggie.
That's a hard one to do, but definitely it's important.
And possible.
The big part is rebuilding the trust.
Right, and showing commitment and the desire to rebuild the trust in the relationship.
Yeah, and rebuilding the relationship itself, depending on what the betrayal was. Sometimes it needs a big effort.
And that is the indication of our interest in making that commitment, right? By showing the action. So it's wonderful to say words that indicate but are you able to walk the walk, right? So can you put your actions behind it? How might you be able to modify your behavior if it was a transgression, and how can you exhibit good behavior that shows that you are in fact adhering to these agreements, right?
Great.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little more when we get to that section.
We will.
You get so excited.
I do. I'm invested in this.
I know you are. Yeah. It's a big subject. I think trust is a big thing in a relationship. I think we talked about last week how sometimes people start in a position of trust in a relationship. So you go in giving trust freely, and then other cases people only grant trust later on,
right?
And once you get to know somebody.
Right. It's interesting because I think often when we talk about this, we might seem as though we're speaking primarily about a binary relationship or a coupled relationship together, and that may or may not be the case, right? This goes to the extent of being solo poly or being in a triad or multiple, big polycule, wherever it is. These are going to play out and be true to all of those things. But it's just an interesting consideration. This level of trust. What is it like when I am a solo practitioner as opposed to being in a group? Do they already have their levels of trust? What are my levels of trust? How can we integrate these? How can we enhance our positions? So if I'm invited into a triad and with a couple, do I feel as though they already have their agreements of trust and bonds and all these things? And can I trust them that I'm going to be represented? I'm going to be seen? There's a whole bunch of different things. Bringing someone new in, can we trust that they're going to be in accordance with where we're at? So, and we only find that out by talking about it. Communication.
Yeah, and I think in those cases, there's a lot of different things to consider, especially if it's an existing group that you're joining and that they may already have established agreements. I know that's one thing that I've heard before speaking to clients about, where there's agreements between 2 people and they don't share that with the third person, and that can put the third person in a difficult position. So anyway, we are going on a tangent.
We are on a tangent, but it brings up another point. So just for the sake of argument, so you and I might be in a couple and invite somebody in with us, and we might have agreements that exist primarily between the two of us, but may not be applicable to the other person.
Correct.
Or we might have to make new arrangements to them.
Yeah, I think you would have to reimagine it altogether.
Oh, thank you for the birthday wishes, everybody. What I'm wanting for my birthday present are live hugs, if possible, and if not, virtual hugs. And If you can't hug me, then hug somebody within your arm's length, please. So.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone, for joining. Thanks so much. I see. Oh, Lauren says, fellow people pleaser here. I've done a lot of work learning how to say no in general life. Never thought about it, people pleasing, as being a misrepresentation, but it definitely is. Great point. Mm-hmm. Great point.
All right. Ooh, for a Monday or a Monday morning, nonetheless, right? Right?
After a weekend in the sun.
Too much partying.
Oh man, we have burns in places. Anyway.
It was a nude beach, so yeah.
Nude beach. But we did pretty good, but I got like random things burnt. I don't know. On day 2.
Random things.
Like the top of my, like one small spot on the top of my foot. I was pretty good getting the private parts not burnt this time, but last year we did. Anyways, let's start with number 1. So consider the reason behind the lie or the betrayal. So I know for me and for many people, when someone lies to you or betrays you, you don't really care about the reason, but sometimes the reason is important because there may be something more behind it that you're not aware of.
Exactly.
It doesn't necessarily mean what they did was right, but it can help you consider how you might react differently.
Yeah, absolutely. In the heat of the moment, when we find out about the lie, and the other person might say, well, it's because, and it's like, I don't want to hear about the because, like, you wronged me, and that's all I want to care about. But if we can get past that initial anger and shock of it, then we might start to pause and say, well, what was at play? What happened that the agreement, the parameters were violated or bent or whatever, however you want to frame it? What was the need that was being addressed there? So was the agreement not viable to begin with? Did I agree to something that I thought was really not of my subscribing, but I did it because I thought, well, this is one way of getting to something else, or it's because I don't want to say no, or it's a difficult conversation. Whatever the reason, there's a reason generally behind what we do. So what was that play that would make this violation occur?
Right. And beyond agreements, it could be that if they're leaving out information. So I know for me, leaving out information is almost as bad, if not worse, than lying, for example. So you have say you do kitchen table polyamory, and you're pretty open about the things that you talk about and share, and that I went on a date, like not the details of it, but that I did this, or I was going to do this, or I went and whatever it is, and then the information's not shared. That can be felt to be a betrayal. But it might be, I'm going to keep talking, that your partner was doing it for some reason to protect you, or to protect your feelings or something, because they thought something, and not that it's right, but it could be one of the reasons why they did it.
Right. So they may have some type of justification in their mind, and maybe we might gain insight into that if they were to share it. Is that where you're going with?
I'm just suggesting that being open, I could be very angry, and I'm sure I've been angry at you before for leaving out information, as you may have been angry at me before. It's like, well, I didn't lie to you, but you didn't tell me. And so I think, I don't know, I felt, and then part of the reason you may have done it before, I may have done it to you, was to protect me from feeling hurt about something.
Right. But was I also then just wanting to protect my feelings about making you feel hurt, right? So was it uncomfortable for me? So it'd be better if we just didn't talk about it. But then, that kind of goes to a later part that we will address. I know I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but it's the idea of there's 2 schools of thoughts, right? Some say we should be really forthcoming and transparent and talk about all that was involved in it. And other people are like, well, do you really need to know the juicy details? What does it matter whether it was John or Mary or X or Z or what exactly was involved? It's the idea that there was something that went beyond. But there's also the idea that there's kind of 2 issues, right? There's the act that might have caused the violation, but then there's also the lack of being transparent about it, the lie, the violation of trust. So there's the incident itself, the action of it, and the not being forthcoming about it. And then it becomes 2 components, as opposed to saying, like, look, this is where it's at. I want to do these things. I'm going to do this. I did this thing. If we're being forthcoming about it, then the idea of having lied about it is not an issue. So we might, before going into it, talk about, well, this is, this needs to be amended. I'm having issue with this agreement.
Right. you keep going back to being agreement that's been broken, but I think that's one small example. But you're picking on that one for some reason.
But there are others. Yeah, I mean, there's many opportunities to apply this to.
Yeah, and it's possible too that it was a miscommunication or misunderstanding. There's those things too. Mm-hmm. But I think for the person who's done the offending, I think we started talking about this, is consider why you actually did it. Right. Like I know this sounds terrible, but it actually may be possible that you were purposefully trying to sabotage something, or, like being really truthful with yourself about what was the cause. Why would you have done this thing?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, as you said, an idea of sabotaging, I think of two things. One, am I wanting to blow up the relationship and get out of it, and it's just like a messy way of doing that? Or am I wanting to stay in the relationship, but maybe there's been some past transgression that's happened between us, and I'm harboring the resentment, and I'm thinking, well, she does this or he does that to me, so why don't I just do that? And we become rather casual and callous about it, and it's dishonoring our interactions with each other. So be mindful of that. Mm-hmm. Check your intention yourself. I've transgressed, and what was at play? What was making me do that? So was I, just being selfish in the moment? Was I being absent-minded? Did I feel that the agreement or the marriage or whatever you want to call it was not a good fit? What was going on there? Because if we can get to the understanding of that, then it will alleviate the problem. I think that the cheating part, the violation, is the symptom of something else potentially.
Sometimes, yeah, for sure. Or it could just be that's the way the person is. So like
pathologically lying.
Potentially. So, somebody wrote, it says Facebook user, you mustn't have given StreamYard permission to see your name. He said, I always wonder if trust, the same as jealousy, is not about the other person, but about ourselves. Yeah, and I would agree. In some ways it is. We may not want to be open to trusting. So for the person too that's been offended, I guess it's also realizing why you might be having a strong reaction to this, and maybe you wasn't actually a big deal.
Right.
That happens too, right?
You think so? It might not. You might be overinflating it.
Well, I guess it depends on what it is, but I think we need to, when things happen that upset us in the relationship, is it really a betrayal? I guess I'm going back to that. Is it really a betrayal of trust, or is it we feel uncomfortable with something that happened, even though it might have been within our agreements?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned it, because not too long ago, the other day, you and I had a little bit of an issue, and you had said that you were going to do something, and then you did something different to it. And it wasn't really a big betrayal per se,
right? But
I did attach a fair amount of emotion to it, and it represented itself in a bit of anger and feeling as though, whatever the feelings were, I placed a fair amount of importance on it. But then I was able to see that I was attaching a lot to this, and was it that important? So I addressed the issue with you, and then recognizing that I was putting a lot of importance to it, and I was going to essentially be affected negatively myself by it. I thought, well, can I release myself from this? Can I simply say, okay, I've let my grievance be known, it was aired, you heard it, and now can I let it go? Because I want to forgive you, but also for my own pleasure of life. How much do I want to stay stuck in that moment in the past, or how much could I leave it? I know essentially that you are a good person. You treat me well. You treat me with respect, kind, and understanding. You honor me. So let's let that go if possible. And I did, and here we are. We moved past it.
And I think we had a pretty good time after that.
We always do. We always do. But
it was very good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
In any situation, though, you're going to attach how much importance
exactly.
to that
That's what I was trying
you want to have.
That's what I was trying to say.
Set yourself free from it.
Yeah.
Don't be a doormat, but you can choose if you want to be bothered.
That's true. Like it totally depends on what the transgression or what it was. But I felt you were really understanding and
I am good like
open.
But
this guy.
No, but listen, in a way, it sometimes is hard in the moment when you're feeling heated. But that act of generosity to yourself and to the other, will then be picked up, and hopefully, inevitably, it will be given back to you.
Right.
So.
For sure. I mean, you made a big shift. Like I even saw it, and it was great. It was great for me. So it was a very nice gift for me. So.
But at the same time, I must admit that I was a little vengeful and did punish you by demanding sex on demand. which
you did, which wasn't really a punishment.
Kind of like, yeah, but kind of like borders on consent, non-consent, and a whole bunch of stuff. But that's
I don't know. I feel like
another conversation.
I feel like I was pretty consenting.
Yeah, I think you like that punishment.
Yeah.
Were you setting me up so I could like forgive and punish you and do that? What kind of forgiveness does punishment have in it? But anyway, it was good time. But the point is, we will attach a level of importance necessary or not necessary to it, and can we allow ourselves to participate in forgiveness? Because in a sense, we are setting ourselves free from that resentment, right?
That's true. We're gonna get to that too.
Okay, fantastic.
You're the king of segues.
Yeah, but I jump ahead.
That's okay. Right. It's okay. It's all good information. All good. We do have to hear information like how many times? 3 times, 5 times, 6 times, a million times?
Even more so sometimes. But I think also it depends on your intention, right? Are you just hearing it? Are you really listening to it? And how much of that do you actually want to change?
Yeah.
You might have an intellectual understanding, but emotionally you might want to maintain the status quo. We'll see if we're willing to give up our position for something else.
That's true. So number 2 is communicate. Our favorite thing. I feel like that's on every list that we talk about.
It's critically important.
It is critically important.
Yeah, we should be able to say everything, right? Have all of our thoughts and feelings. We're not necessarily to act on all of our thoughts and feelings, but we are certainly entitled to have them and to talk about them.
Right. So it might be painful for both. I'd say for both parties. Sure. But one of the biggest aspects I think of rebuilding trust after there's been something is to talk about it, and to be really set aside time to talk about these things. I think it's important, while I say that, I think it's also important not to spend every moment of every day talking about it. So, because sometimes things like that can fill a room and make things really difficult. So having maybe chunks of time to talk about it.
Yeah.
And
Lauren's asking in the chat here about if I'm understanding correctly, about it getting out of control, like the avalanche of thoughts and feelings. So I think one thing that's really good is to be able to kind of check in ourselves and say, like, am I getting overwhelmed by these feelings? Am I catastrophizing all these feelings? Am I going too far in the extreme? Can I reel it back a little bit, knowing that feelings aren't always facts, right? But I also suggest sometimes that we might go to a neutral place to talk about it, right? Because sometimes we're heated in discussion, and if we're at home, we might kind of drop F-bombs or get a little bit too loud, whatever. So if we go to a park or a cafe or something, we might be uncomfortable expressing it that way, but maybe the idea that there is some neutral position might,
that's actually
might be
a cool idea.
Yeah,
and like I think trying to stay focused on the matter at hand is sometimes tough, and not bringing up old wounds into old things. Like, so some of the things that you could do and spend time on is being very clear about how you feel about the situation, using the I statements. I feel, this makes me feel.
Right.
When this happens, this makes me feel, rather than you did this and you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You suck.
Well, when we say you, right, we are. It's accusatory in the sense. Yes. I feel it can hurt the other person's ego, even if they are fully admitting to their guilt and stuff. When we say I or me, it is it protects the other person's ego and helps us to create a dialogue where the other person doesn't feel as though they have to defend themselves. And very often when we defend ourselves, we actually go on the aggressive part,
for sure.
Right? We become offensive to act as a defense.
Right.
By talking about the I or the me, it prevents that, right?
Yeah. So also, saying why this particular betrayal hurt you, and
what was it about it? Yeah.
Yeah. What was it about it? And then even what you need to start rebuilding trust. And I think it would be fair in this situation if, like, Lauren, you were overwhelmed by feelings and, it was bringing those up for you. You could say that, like, I'm really overwhelmed by these feelings, and it's bringing up issues. Like, if you're aware of why you might be, it might be more than this present situation, you can share that with them. Like, I know I've shared that as like this, I'm sorry, I'm overreacting because I've had a situation where this has happened. And this was very triggering for me. Like, I'm sure we've said that before.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah,
because we have our wounds from other relationships.
Without a doubt. Yeah, we come with a history, no doubt. And so it might, little things that I do might not really affect other people, but if it's been something that you've had in the past, it could trigger you and then bring back all that, and then you fall back into that uncomfortable pattern that you're not wanting to be part of. You're like, no, this is a big deal. And I'm like, why is that a big deal? It's not a big deal. But so can we appreciate where the other person's coming from, right? And let that, and your way to find that out is by letting it be known, by communicating.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thanks, Lauren. Someone's asking, communication can be challenging with certain personality types, for sure. So what happens when one person opens up but the other is mostly a clam?
Wow. In that case, not to give away all my secrets, but I would try and ask them open-ended questions, right?
Oh, yes.
So ask them questions that will not culminate in a yes/no response, right?
Yeah.
So, if you offer somebody a question that can be answered in yes/no, and they're not very communicative to begin with, if they're a clam, then most likely they're going to respond in a yes/no. So find ways that you can engage in the dialogue. Right? Sometimes it's like, when this happens, I feel this way. How does it make you feel? Something like that, for example, right? So, find ways to invite the dialogue.
And also, do you think it would be helpful? I don't know. You're more experienced in this than me.
Well, you communicate.
Yeah, but to express why it's important for them to talk to you about this, like why it's important to you to hear what their perspective is, or how they feel about things, or.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. By all means. Yeah, maybe. I think. I'll think from the I might not consider it to be all that important, but if my friend, partner, lover, whoever it is, lets me know that it's important to them, if I value them, then hopefully it should be important to me as well.
Right.
So by communicating that, we'll be able to figure out, like, well, this is important to me, and I'd like you to appreciate it, understand it, recognize it, let it be known.
Yeah, and pick your time too. Sometimes not the right time. I know when we have things, I'm like, I want to talk about it in the moment, solve it, get it over with, done. And sometimes you are like, oh, I just need some space for a minute. Like, can you give me a minute? And so it's really hard for me to allow for that. But then I realize that it's actually better for me as well to do that, set aside the time and give them the space and say, like, I'd like to talk about this, but can we, breathe for 5 minutes? 10 minutes and half an hour so I can calm down.
So what do you think when you want to talk about it, we're heated in the moment, and I ask for a timeout, do you think that's for me or do you think it's for you?
Now I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that it's great to talk about things, but yeah, sometimes the moment does get heated, and it's like, it's okay to say, okay, let's just, hopefully you might be able to say, is it okay if we just take like moment? So it doesn't mean that we're going to use this as a way of like checking out and never coming back. We're going to still talk about it, but maybe if it's getting a little bit heated, maybe the bell rings, we go to our corner, and then we come out swinging again.
And could there be other ways of, like, if someone really has a hard time talking, like actually speaking their feelings, what about if they wrote them?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So we might write to each other?
I don't know.
I think that's a wonderful way, potentially. However, sometimes written text, like emails and text messages and stuff, have no intonation or affect attached to them, and we don't know where the emphasis lies, what the spirit was. So I think it could be wonderful to write notes, but you have to also be mindful. That being said, it's great to talk about things, but also sometimes we might let things slip out of our mouth in the heat of the moment that we're wishing we wouldn't have said. So there's the balance between the two, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah. Say what you want to say, but say it in a way that is considerate of the other person, if possible, right? Don't be callous.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't be callous, be considerate.
I'm just looking at our notes.
Let's see, what do you got in the notes?
I'm just saying, for the one that's betrayed, give your partner time to talk, but pay attention to their sincerity as well. So if this is a repetition, in the relationship, then I think, that's something to consider.
Right, for sure. So all the nice words, well, that goes back to the part about action, right? So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, baby, I'm sorry, like, I'll never do that again, I'll never do it again, and yet it keeps happening. Well, the actions aren't backing up the words there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the words become, in a sense, meaningless.
Right.
So where are your actions at that? But again, for me, as a therapist, I would want to look back and say, well, what is going on that you are promising things that you have little intention or having a hard time delivering, and what's with that? Right? So are you making agreements? Are you agreeing to things that are not well suited for you?
Exactly.
What does that play?
Okay, cool. Oh, so we're on number 3. So releasing the anger.
Letting go of resentments, releasing anger. How might one do that?
He'll Sign to me, sing to me when he's ready to open up. That's good. I don't know who that is because it just says Facebook user on our end because we're doing this through a broadcast studio. That's awesome.
You're gonna plug your StreamYard again?
What?
If they say,
if they give permission to StreamYard, then we can see your name. It's like if we go in the comments later, we'll see who it is. But right now, it just shows us Facebook user.
Right.
That's
so if
cool.
you want us to say
That's
hi,
cool.
Oh, what was that? Was that Wonderama where she had that mirror she'd hold up and she's like, I see Betty and I see James. You know, like, I wonder.
Oh, romper room.
Yeah, but I would wake up in the nude, right? Even as a little kid, I was like not wearing my pajamas. So when she was looking at me, it was like, you know, was I standing at attention?
Is that what you were thinking when you were a kid?
Probably.
Oh my God.
I think I was born perfect.
Yes. Well, that's what we love about you.
It's all good.
All right. So releasing the anger. So why is releasing the anger important?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? If you don't, you're just going to be harboring this resentment and it's going to be coming out either directly or inappropriately, but it's going to still be festering there.
Yes.
So yeah, you got to clean house.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be able to talk about it because otherwise you're holding it.
Yeah, you're holding on to it.
And it's caustic. Yeah, you don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. Emotionally drained, physically drained, difficult sleeping, difficult eating. You might be engaging in things that you wouldn't like normally do, like excessive eating or drinking or something else. So
anonymous sex and having angry sex can be a lot of fun, but it's hard to sustain, right?
Yeah. But it is tempting when this happens to say, okay, it's fine, you know, and let's just tamp them down. But I think we need to be in tune with the feelings we're having and then try to, you know, understand where the anger is coming from and work through these other steps that we're going to get to about rebuilding trust to kind of release that anger. Right.
But some people are not well acquainted with their anger or the feelings of resentment and might imagine that it's easier or softer to just avoid them.
Right.
But they will remain. So
they do remain.
When we're willing to endure a little bit of possible difficulty in that feeling, if we're willing to endure some feelings of discomfort in ourselves, then we might be able to talk our way through it, process those feelings, find a way to address what was going on and resolve it and move past it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was just going to say too that last December, I did Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins. And one of the things they did with us, an activity, was to go back into our past, like a memory that really hurt us, something that, and to reimagine ourselves in the situation and release that. And I can tell you, I dealt with two different situations in my life, one from when I was a child and one from a relationship. And having a new perspective on that and seeing what the other person's experience might have been in the moment and what it might have caused it was amazing. And I was able to release that thing, and it's affected me positively even now.
Awesome.
So it's another thing to do is if there's other angers or other hurts that are you're bringing into this situation at hand is to release those as well.
Yeah, fantastic. That's good.
It was really good. I don't know. It was really good. I just wanted to share that.
No, it sounds really good.
It was very empowering to imagine what could be different in that situation and how I had created an entire story around something in my relationship that probably wasn't true.
So how did you catch yourself to be able to identify that? Like, were you able to do it in the moment, like in the heat of the moment? Or
no, I wasn't.
Later on, or?
You mean like when I went back to the situation?
Yeah.
No, I just did it in December, and the situation happened like 7 years ago.
So you had no awareness at the moment?
No, in the moment,
later on, you're able to
I was very upset by this thing that my partner said to me about not being enough, not being smart, this other things, you know what I mean? And it was this conversation in the garage, and I've held on to that for so long. And so I hear that little voice in the back of my head, and then I go back to that time, and because we were splitting up. And I go back to that time and think about what might have been going on in his head at that moment. And I think that he was actually giving me a gift in that he had already decided he didn't want to be in the relationship, and I was the one that was still holding on tight to it. And so he said the thing, consciously or unconsciously, said the thing that he knew would hurt me the most.
But that really severed it for you.
It definitely severed.
Ouch, but good.
Ouch, but good. So it was actually quite a gift. Anyways.
Well, it's a very healthy way of looking at it. I can appreciate that it would not be so easy to look at it at that moment. It's like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
But being able to reflect back on it after and say, well, you know what, actually, it was good that I wasn't wasting my time anymore in this relationship, and that I know that it sparked something in you and was able to motivate you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's that. Do we want to say anything else about releasing the anger? Just that it's important. And even the person who offended.
There's other ways of doing it too, right? Somebody's mentioning about hitting a garbage can or the dumpster. Absolutely. I mean, there's an exercise where you take a plastic thing and you're hitting it. But I prefer, as much as I think it's a great idea of venting a lot of anger, I prefer that we try to articulate rather than demonstrate our anger.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, ideally.
Ideally, yeah.
Hindsight is 2021. Yeah, it's cute.
That's good. So even the person who did the offending may have some of their own feelings. Like they may feel, angry with themselves for what they did.
Yeah, guilt.
And so there'll be some of that they need to release as well and forgive themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that can be debilitating, right? Yeah, we hold on to that as well. Can we release that and forgive ourselves? And I think the best way to forgive ourselves is truly by our action. So if we are really remorseful about it, if we really sincerely appreciate what we did as the violation of trust, then one of the keys to restore that is through our actions, not just by saying it, but by really living it, acting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're on to number 4, rebuilding trust. So let
me know when we get to 69.
I don't think we're hitting 69.
We need to make these points where we can just go to 69. I'm drawn to that number.
1, 2, 3, 69.
Okay, so number 4, the other 69, number 4, rebuilding trust.
Yes.
How do you do that? What do you want to say about that?
So I think it's, first of all, in rebuilding trust, I think we already said it, is recognizing that rebuilding trust takes time.
Right.
And there's some activities on the part of people individually, I think, ourselves individually and together, in order to rebuild trust. So
the violator and the violatee, and together
violate. Yes, together as a couple, or it could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a couple. It could be a polycule, or
sure.
Yeah, it could be several people, right?
And even to ourselves, right? As a solo poly, if we feel as though we didn't stand up for ourselves, if we didn't announce our position, if we kind of gave into things that we might not have otherwise, can we come to terms with our own self-action, right? What was at play that made us not honor our own agreements with ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have decide here. What's that?
Decide to forgive or be forgiven.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, deciding.
Well, it goes back to my earlier example, right? I became conscious of how heated I was becoming in that, and in the grand scheme of things, wasn't really entirely justified. Yeah, okay. So I felt as though I had been wrong, slighted, violated, whatever it was. I announced it. Now, could I let it go? Could I make the conscious decision to forgive and move past it? And then once I did, it was like, okay, so it doesn't mean I necessarily forget about it. We're not asking you to do that, but can we forgive enough that we can restore the quality of our life and have a good time afterwards, right? So we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they used to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just need to decide that you're going to forgive or be forgiven. And then, it might take time to do that, but still the consciousness of deciding to let go of it and move on at some point as you work through there.
Right. But a lot of that, again, comes to what have we done to sort of create this resolution? Not that we might ever have absolute resolution, but are we able to address the issues that created this situation? And when we feel as though they have, then the forgiveness comes to be. So in that earlier example where I was heated, I spoke to you about it. You heard my grievance, you acknowledged it, and then it's like, okay, I can definitely decide to forgive this and let's go on past it.
Yeah, for sure.
Communicate,
really. We're just saying that, say everything.
Yeah, say everything.
So I think being open to self-growth and improvement is another area. So you can't just you can't just heal broken promises with words. I think, like you said, actions. And being willing to do the work, the inner work, I think, to examine why you might have done something and understand that and work towards not doing that again. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. And it often comes again at that requirement of being willing to tolerate some feelings of discomfort, but be able to talk through that.
Yeah.
Psychically mature.
We already talked about sharing your thoughts, so being aware of your innermost feelings and sharing your thoughts. And then the last one is first section is, and wanting it to work.
What does that mean?
So I think if you're going to decide to rebuild trust, I think you need to also decide that you want it to work.
You're really actually wanting that to work.
Yeah, because you can decide, and you do have an option if it's something where it's been a repetition, that you don't want it to work.
True.
You might want to give forgiveness and leave things on good terms, but you may decide that you don't want to make it work, and that's fine too.
Amicably dissolving the venture. Yeah, perhaps. So maybe we should talk more about that in another segment about how do we maintain certain safe face. How can we dissolve relationships well?
Oh, that is a good topic.
Yeah. Something to say. Or also, when we are no longer being invited into it, how might we be able to either address what caused that or see that it has very little to do with us? Look at both possibilities of that.
Okay. So more specifically for the offender in rebuilding trust.
The violator.
The violator. Why is our color's going really weird? And when we go close, it goes yellow.
It does, yeah.
Interesting. So for the person who offended, it's difficult to be reminded of your wrongdoings, but you need to show that the behavior is gone by changing your behavior.
The behavior is gone by changing your behavior.
That errant behavior is gone by changing your behavior.
Right.
So,
and it may take time for the other person to recognize, or persons to recognize.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that point.
Okay.
So what else can the offender, I hate using that word, but I don't know what else to say.
Well, violator, offender, transgressor, liar, cheater, stealer.
Yeah.
Which I've been all of those things.
Yeah, so you want to be completely transparent, open, and forthcoming from now on. Especially if the transgression was lying or leaving out information or whatever. Yeah.
And then be honest. Are we there now?
Yes.
All right. So when we want to be honest, I'm going to read your notes. Be honest and work to understand and state why the bad behavior occurred. Statements such as "I don't know" don't instill confidence or help you get to the root of the issue. That's absolutely true. So something's happened between us. And we're wanting to talk about it, and we're trying to explore to find out what's going on. And I simply come back with, well, I don't know. And we might not consciously know, but are we expressing or demonstrating the willingness to at least look introspectively, to be forthcoming, to be open, and talk about what might really have causes of all the possible ways of interacting, of all the things we could have done? What made it important for us to do this, even especially if we had some understanding, some agreement, some parameter in place? What was at play that created this fluctuation?
It might be too that you say I don't know because you don't want to admit it. So that's where the honesty part.
I don't know, or I don't want to know, or I don't want the other to know. Absolutely. So it might be difficult to make those expressions. But if we don't, are we then destined to repeat them? Is it what's going to have changed? What will be different? So are we able to talk about them, come to a better understanding for the other person, for ourselves mutually, and where will that take us?
Awesome. Yeah. So then also taking responsibility for your actions and apologizing. Sincerely. Avoiding defensiveness.
How so?
Well, saying I just, or that's your trigger. I just, no, but I just because
I did that because this, that, and the other thing. And I think what that does then is it supports your position rather than really acknowledging the other position, other person's position.
Yeah, and defensiveness is not going to make them feel better. So using I statements.
No, defensiveness is not going to make them feel better, but it might also inform us as to where the other person was coming from.
True.
So it doesn't make us necessarily feel better. We don't necessarily feel heard or understood, but it might also give us insight as to what was at play then. So when we come up with the I don't know, if we're saying it because this, that, well, then there might be something there.
That's true. Oh, someone wrote, action beats words when we're building trust, but is there a ratio of words to action, e.g. 1 to 2, 1 to 5? I think it depends on the person, really. Like some people are words people. Like if your love language is words of affirmation, then you're going to want to hear it over and over again that they're sorry.
I'm laughing because that whole idea of love languages, words of affirmation is the only one that is actual language.
Yeah. Yeah, but action and touch and like other anyways.
Yeah, no, there's people.
Yeah. But the words you might want to say is not being defensive. I think we have an example. For example, I'm sorry I lied to you about where I was going. I know I should have told you the truth and I regret causing you pain. I want you to know I'll never do it again. If you can say never, because that's what we were talking about earlier.
I'll never do it again. So yeah, so again, there's issue with that, right? Some people say, well, you can't predict the future. You can't, or you should not rather, make promises that you can't keep or that you don't know. But again, maybe it comes back to the intention. But how does it sound then if, like, I've been caught in the line and said, well, I'll try and never do it again. Well, trying isn't where it's at. It's what you're actually going to do, right? Don't do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's hard to say, I promise I'll never do that again. That almost sounds too fantastic. And I think I might become suspect if someone were to know, without any reservation, they'll never do that again.
Yeah.
Might sound reassuring, but is it realistic?
Well, it has to be realistic for it to be a true statement.
So are the agreements, are the parameters, is the contract really realistic? Is it viable? Yeah. And again, it goes back to that ongoing consent, right? So I might have said 3 years ago that I won't do this or that or the other thing. Is it still something that we're wanting today? And is it something we're wanting tomorrow? So can we have these check-ins? Can we find out, like, where are we on this thing, right? Can we do our quarterly reports and take stock of where we're at?
Exactly.
What's working, what's not? What we'd like to modify?
Yeah.
What can we revisit?
Exactly.
Good.
Okay, so for the person that was betrayed, also don't love that word.
The betrayee.
The betrayee.
The betrayee.
So I think we, like the person who's betrayed, also has a part to play in this. So work on understanding what went awry in the relationship before the betrayal actually happened.
That's a tough one. Listening to that, I think, so I've been betrayed and now I have to see my part in it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think there could be some, just like the part about the agreements. Maybe you've asked your partner to do something that was not realistic.
Am I being open enough to consider being flexible? Am I demanding things that are not in that sense?
Well, that's a possibility.
Or how am I receiving the betrayal? Am I so heated that I'm not wanting to hear where the other person's coming from, or what did it trigger in me about past traumas? Yeah.
And while it might not be an excuse, your partner may do something because of a situation in your relationship. And so they may have made a decision that, while not right, might be associated with how the state of your relationship was at that time, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Doesn't excuse it, but I think if someone has done something, it's definitely something to look at, what might have been going on in the relationship when that happened.
Right. It's playoff hockey season, right? So I'm like, go Habs, go. But there was a game the other night where a pretty good player, he's pretty emotional, kind of, but I don't think he has bad intentions, but he's pretty emotional. And he actually put a hit on the other guy and it caused a lot of harm. It really hurt the other player. And I wonder, though, that person who made the hit, they did that in the heat of the moment. It was a passionate play, right? They were invested in it. So they did something bad, but they're not a bad player. They're not ill-intended. So what about transgressions that happen in the heat of the moment? Can we put ourselves in the other person's shoes and say, well, I don't like the transgression. It wasn't cool. We're not going to do it again. But I can sort of understand that maybe in the heat of the moment, things go on. So I trust this person. I love them. They honor me. We honor each other. All is good. But that one thing happened. Can I use that in my forgiveness, in my generosity of forgiveness to the other person, that I might consider where they're coming from if it's isolated? If it's happening across the board, then there's something else happening there. But can I put myself in the other person's shoes, not only to forgive them, but to help in how I'm going to experience this impropriety, how I'm going to experience what has gone on, that I might set myself free of it.
That's a good point.
I keep an eye. I mean, if it's going to be a recurring thing, then we have a whole different kettle of fish. I'm full of like antiquated expressions. We have a whole different kettle of fish to deal with. But is it something that really can be let go of, or is it something that's going to be addressed?
Exactly. Okay. And provide positive reinforcement when your partner does do something to help rebuild the trust.
Throw the dog a bone.
Well, you need to show that you're also committed to giving them a second chance, and
for sure.
you know that you're not holding resentments. If they're really truly trying to change their behavior, and they're also really sorry for what they did, then you know holding it up against them for a long period of time is not helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be.
And then I think the final part, and we already mentioned this, is knowing that it's okay if you don't want to consider continue the relationship, if it's something, like I said, that's been ongoing and that sort of thing. So if you don't feel like your partner's being, if they're just going through the motions.
They're not really invested.
They're not invested in it. So.
Maybe we need to that goes back to the earlier idea of making a segment about how to dissolve our relationships amicably.
Yeah, exactly.
In ways that we feel good about ourselves and might help the other person. Yeah.
Okay, so number 5 is showing commitment and rebuilding the relationship. And I think we've talked a lot about this, like sort of sprinkled throughout. But I think being empathetic, sharing pain and frustration and anger, showing remorse and regret, and allowing space for each of you to work through the hurt feelings is important, and that's can be healing for both people. Yeah. Did you want to add? I thought you were going to say something.
No, I think those are really great points. Yeah.
I think in order to start rebuilding is like, what do you want that's maybe different? How can you stay committed to the relationship, and you both would want to be committed to making that work? So everybody plays a role. And I think we sort of, all the things we talked about earlier kind of tie into that.
Right, but being able to gain greater insight and clarity into what we're wanting, and then being able to express that.
Exactly. And I know in order to rebuild the relationship, some people think about it as treating the relationship like it's a completely new one. So if you really want to, if it's a major hurt and it's something that you want to work through and like begin again, then you can treat the relationship like it's a completely new one.
Yeah, that's great. So we might kind of find ways to reintroduce ourselves and say what it is we're wanting, not wanting, or we're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, express what our needs are and what we need to make the relationship work.
Right. Sure.
And also, if you're working through things, not withholding trust in the relationship.
What do you mean by that? How would you withhold trust?
Well, if something's happened and you've worked through those things, then you should start. If you're going to truly rebuild the relationship, it's starting again from a position of trust. You know what I mean? If you've worked through and dealt with those situations. I don't know. It would be difficult to do it, but it's like you're starting with trust. This is brand new. Like it's as if, it hasn't happened, even though it has, but it might be an opportunity to work through some things that you hadn't before.
And might actually, you might come out on the other side feeling even closer, that the bonds of trust have been solidified. It goes back to the banking analogy that I like, the idea that coming back from the trust. Well, I think metaphors are good ways of seeing things. But it comes back to the idea of we might have had a line of credit established with the bank or the credit card, and then the trust happens, or the breach of trust happens, rather, and that is a default on the payment. It is a bankruptcy, and now we have to start back with reestablishing that line of credit, reestablishing that trust. So we might not be able to pick up just where we left off. There's some hurt, some considerations. We have to kind of rebuild our credit. So we do that with smaller investments, and that's natural. Right after we've been hurt, we're less likely to just be so open. So given that we might have need to kind of take back and protect ourselves, make ourselves feel secure as the lender again. And here we go. We start building the trust, and through these actions of repayment, these actions of demonstration in trust, then we get to get deeper and deeper into our levels of investment and trust, if that's where we're wanting to go.
And maybe it's an opportunity, because I think this happens this happens very early on in people's open relation, like if they're opening up a relationship or in polyamory, that something happens that you weren't expecting. And so things happen, and we can use these things as an opportunity to actually set up agreements, that sort of thing. Because I think a lot of people don't really know, or
until it happens.
Their activities I've had clients, their activities kind of got ahead of their agreements, and so things were progressing, but they weren't able to keep up with it. So this is an opportunity to take a pause and go, okay, how do we want this? What do we envision this new relation to be?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to something that happened early on in our relationship where things had come up, and I had a bit of an abreaction to it, and you were there to offer me different insight, different support, and that made me feel very much like I could trust you on a very deep emotional level. So sometimes some adversity might actually be an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. Well, everything's an opportunity for growth if you look at it that way. So those are the main 5. So a few other thoughts that we want to give. So avoid dwelling on the past. So if you have worked through it, it's about not bringing it up.
Well, but we can only not bring it up once we feel like we've fully been heard, and
for sure
our resentment has been aired, and there's some action
for sure
attached to
but
it.
you don't want it coming up in every single argument.
No,
you did this thing to me,
right?
And
if you feel as though if you become aware or alerted to the idea that you are constantly bringing it back up, then obviously that's telling us that it's not been well processed, and there's more work that needs to be done on it.
Exactly.
But don't give up. You can keep talking about it.
I think there's always a possibility to rebuild after there's been a breach of trust. If you truly, both parties or all parties, truly want to do something about it, I think it's possible. So finally, we can just leave it at.
Our producers are giving us a signal.
I know this one went long. We were going to maybe split it in 2, but we went for the whole thing long.
So long.
If you are having trouble with or experiencing issues around trust in your relationships, it's you don't have to do it alone. There's lots of people out there that can support you, and
in fact, we're 2 of them.
In fact, we're 2 of them. So it's always good to reach out for support, and every relationship goes through some sort of rough patches, and I think in polyamory and open relating, especially if you're just starting and just dipping your toes in, there can be things that happen. So there's no shame in reaching out for help.
No.
So we are here. I'm a relationship and awesomeness coach, and Andre is a therapist. Sex positive therapist.
If you please.
So,
but for many people, just reaching out is the hardest part. But then once you make that call, once you make that contact with us or other people, you're halfway there. You're getting, demonstrating to yourself the willingness.
So that's it for today.
Cool.
We will post the links once this gets posted. No,
not in the guides. I thought I had it right. I was so proud. I thought it was in the guides.
No, all the lives that we do, other than the current one, are posted in the guides section of the group.
Okay, that's right.
The current one, this one will be in the announcements, and in the post I will include the links on how you can book a call with Andre or myself. And also we're still working on getting ready to launch our program, which is I think it's called multiple. Did we name it Multiple Loves Method?
Really?
Creating, I don't know.
First time I've heard that, but okay.
It's about creating epic relationships that are secure, sexy, and hot, and something like that.
Oh, I'd like to hear more about that.
So if you're interested in that, let us know. But that's another Monday Live for you, all about trust. So let us know what you thought. If you have any additional ideas on how you build trust, then drop them in the comments. And we'll see you here next week at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Daylight time. Bye.
Bye.